Welcome, everybody. This is the 3D Printer Chat podcast, the podcast about 3D printing, and I'm your host, Chris Garrett. Today I'm here with a special guest. He's Joe Larson, but you might know him as the 3D printing professor. How are you doing, Joe?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on because we've got a topic today that's a little bit controversial, right?
Well, yeah. I guess it's a topic that people just don't want to deal, and quite frankly, I don't want to deal with. But that we kind of have to. We kind of have to face this because it's either we face this, or we enter into this sort of paralysis creativity, and I don't want that.
Yeah, and it's also what we're talking about is intellectual property and Creative Commons, and without it, we're in a little bit of a problem because it's the Wild West. It's people just doing whatever they want, and that'll just stifle innovation, won't it?
Well, it's more complicated than that even. It's not that without Creative Commons we'd be the Wild West. Without Creative Commons, we wouldn't be able to share. That's the thing that I think that a lot of people misunderstand, is that Creative Commons doesn't protect the creators. It does absolutely nothing for the creators. It protects it allows the creators to share their works with other people. That's the big misunderstanding about Creative Commons, is that everybody thinks it protects the creators. It doesn't. It protects the downloaders, or rather it frees up the downloaders and frees up the creators to share with them.
Yeah, it makes it absolutely clear what you're allowed to do and what you should do with it and what your obligations are and what your rights are, right?
And without that, the only thing that you're allowed to do is look at it. I mean, whenever a movie is distributed, there's a copyright notice on the front of it that says you're allowed to watch this movie, you're allowed to use this movie for personal use, but you're not allowed to use it for any other use. And Creative Commons is the same thing, in that we're saying, hey, you're allowed to download this model, you're allowed to print this model, you're allowed to use it for whatever use that we say, contingent upon a couple of criteria,
Yeah, so you're on the other side of this as well. You've got an Etsy store, you sell things, you design your own things. So how do you approach it? How do you visualize?
Well, I only sell designs that I create. I don't. I have the advantage of being a content creator, so I can go out there and make something that nobody's ever seen before, or that's based off another design, and then I will sell that. I don't sell other people's designs. I don't fuss with Creative Commons and all that, because I have my own designs to create or to sell and things like that. It's the people who don't have their own designs to sell and think that, oh, we can just get a 3D printer and we'll manufacture the things that people want and they'll pay us for it and we're good to go. Those are the people who have to pay attention to Creative Commons.
So let's go into that a little bit. There was a famous case recently, but it's not just those specific people that are doing this. There's a lot of people doing it. So how should it be approached? What are you allowed to do in terms of printing somebody else's design?
Well, okay, so I'm not a lawyer. I've read Creative Commons and I understand Creative Commons, but my understanding of all of this stuff basically boils down to my own learning and understanding. So take anything I say as advice but not legal counsel. I'm not a lawyer. So what you're allowed to do, let me first start with what you should do. In my opinion, Will Wheaton, PAX in grief, I don't even remember when this was, early 2000s, gave an incredible talk about the community on the internet. You can look it up. I should probably look it up so that I don't. But his mantra has kind of been, "Don't be a jerk," and I'm censoring the sentiment because I do that. Yeah. But don't be a jerk is basically the mantra of should be the mantra of the internet. If somebody made something, if somebody created something, and you see the value in it enough that you want to use that to make money, you are admitting that it has value by that, aren't you? I mean, that sounds reasonable to me. If you want to sell something I made, you are essentially saying, hey, what you made has value, is worth selling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Not just intrinsic value, but a monetary value.
A monetary value. And so you cannot on the one hand say that you created has value, but you have no value to me, and so I'm not going to compensate you for this because yes, your thing has value, but you don't. The contradiction in that is makes you a jerk if you're saying that, you know? You cannot say that without being a jerk. So don't do that. But that's not, again, that's not a legal discussion. That's just my opinion. My opinion is don't be a jerk, guys, you know? Think about what you're saying, think about what you're doing. Now, legally, anything that is created in a fixed form is protected by a law called copyright. And this exists all around the world in different forms, but pretty much very similar. And the idea behind copyright is to say if you create something, you have the rights to its distribution and use. And it's automatic. Almost every copyright does not need to be registered to exist.
Because that's one of the myths, right? That you have to have it registered somewhere. Somebody has to be told. But just through the act of creating this fixed thing, you have the copyright.
Correct. Now, there are registered copyrights, which is essentially copyrights with teeth. And the cool thing about registering copyrights, again, my understanding of it, and I've never done this, although maybe I should, is that you can create a collection of works. You can take all of the works that you've done in a certain year and bulk copyright them all as a collection and just pay one copyright collection fee. And I think the copyright fee to register a copyright is reasonable. It's not like patenting. I think it's something. The top of my head says $35, but I'm not sure. $35 to $70. It's less than $100 to get a registered copyright.
If you're in business, it's not a crippling amount, right?
It's even if you're not in business, even if you're just an individual who produces a lot of stuff, and you want to be able to have the teeth to go after people who don't value your stuff, you know. There was a podcast that I listened to a while ago, and I wish I could remember who it was and where it was, and I've been searching for it since I can't find it now. But where they interviewed a guy who basically made suing people who steal his stuff. He will produce T-shirts and the most generic designs you can think of, but he produces a lot of them, and then he goes out shopping, literally, to Walmart or to wherever people sell T-shirts and stuff. And whenever he sees his design, he will buy up a copy of it to be sure that they've got it, and then he will sue everybody. Like, he will sue the company that made the T-shirt, the artist who ripped off his stuff, the store that was selling it. And this dude makes a living catching people who violate copyright. Now, mind you, he's suing Walmart and big name retailers and big name stores. I don't think that we're going to see that sort of behavior in 3D printing yet, because nobody's making enough money to make it worthwhile. Yeah. Like, we could sue a dude who's running an Etsy store and selling our stuff, and we might even win a lawsuit, but what are we going to collect from that? Like, what do they have to collect? So I think that part of the reason why this is all such a legal gray area isn't because we don't know the law or don't know which way the law is going to go. It's because there's been nobody worth suing to establish the law, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, and most of us don't have the resources or the lawyers on retainer to actually go after people, even if they're in our jurisdiction. I mean, we're lucky to be in North America, but a lot of the people doing this aren't, right?
Yeah. But even if they're, you know, even if they're in our jurisdiction, even if we don't have a lawyer, if we had a case, we could get a lawyer pretty easily. Punitive damages are substantial. Punitive damages are the minimum amount of money that you're going to win by suing somebody. They're different by each state, but they basically give lawyers a your case because punitive damages are ridiculously blown up for the crime, really, in a lot of ways. They're ridiculous, but they give lawyers to go after somebody. Now, if the person who you're suing has no chance of paying those punitive damages, then no lawyer is going to pick it up. They'll be like, yeah, we can win a case and woohoo for that, but who's going to pay us at the end of the day?
Yeah.
And so that's where it is in 3D printing. It's not that the law doesn't exist, and it's not that we don't know what the law is. It's that at this point, it's not financially viable for a lawyer to go after that sort of thing. So, right now, the big famous cases that we're looking at, the guy who won a couple $1,000s, that's small claims.
Yeah,
that's nothing, and I don't even know if they've gotten paid for their small claims. He's just using that as an excuse to say, "See, I didn't do anything bad," because that's not that's not what the case was about, and we gotten any money from that.
Yeah.
He got what, a month's rent or two, maybe.
Yeah. So if without lawyers, what can we do as content creators to mitigate, not necessarily cure this thing, but mitigate or stem the tide?
Well, again, let's go back to don't be a jerk, okay? And let's plan on that for a little while. Let's plan on not being jerks, okay? If some dude is being a jerk and stealing your stuff, the first thing to realize is that they are establishing your market. If they're making enough money to be able to do this, then there's a market for your stuff, and you can go on Etsy and you can make a claim and you can say, hey, this person is using something that does not belong to them, and they'll get shut down. But then why not set up your own Etsy store? And I've talked to a lot of designers, and a lot of people have a lot of different reasons for wanting to or not wanting to do this, but there's a market for your stuff. They're saying there's a market for your stuff. Why don't you think about selling it yourself a little bit,
Would you actually recommend it then? Is there still a market for doing this? Could you still make some money with Etsy or
Absolutely. It's not gonna replace your day job, but I mean, if you have a 3D printer and you're printing out your own designs, chances are you're not utilizing that 3D printer very much. Now, you can hear in the background here, my 3D printers are running right now. See? That's because I've got, somebody wants my stuff, and so I'm putting it out there on Etsy, and I'm running my 3D printer. Now, if it gets to be a big market, you're going to run into two problems. You're going to run into two problems anytime. And in fact, the people who are selling your stuff are going to run into two problems. The demand is low, and two, the overhead is a little bit higher than you think. You have to price it right. And most people on Etsy are underpricing their 3D prints because they think, 3D printing is practically free. I'll just put it out there. And then somebody asks for this piece that's going to take 8, 10, 16 hours to print, and after 3 failures, you're having a hard time getting it out to them. The reality is that it's not as easy as that to get a product to market,
So how do you price your product so that it'll sell, but also that you're covered in that way?
Yeah, and that's the really hard thing. There have been more than a few products that I've tried to put out there at the price that seems reasonable to me for the time and effort that it takes me to produce them that won't sell. I've put products out there that are way too low priced, and afterwards there's no math formula. There's no volume of object plus time to produce divided by the square root of the hypotenuse. There's no formula for this. Maybe there is, but I don't know what it is. For me, it's just trial and error. My robot chess sets, I don't know if you're familiar with any of my designs, but one of the first designs that I got famous for was a chess set that assembles into a
Yeah,
robot, which is pretty darn cool in my
it
opinion.
is. I agree.
Well, and in the opinion of MakerBot and Tinkercad, because they gave me a $2,000 3D printer for it, so I get to monetize how cool that is, which is also pretty
Yeah.
cool. But I can't sell those on Etsy because they're a pain in the neck to produce. And unless I can get some good filament, I'm going to try it again with ASA because I want to make these available to people. They really are very cool, but I can't produce them reliably enough that I could charge a low enough money. Right, last time I sold them for $70 a piece. Nobody wants to buy them for $70 a piece, and the few who do, I still felt like I was undercharging for it for the amount of work that I was going through to get this thing out there.
Yeah, I've just recorded a podcast about the production and manufacture using 3D printers, and people always seem to leave their own time to last to factor in even wear and tear and the filament cost, but they don't factor in their own time.
Well, and sorry about that. My printer just finished. Cool new print. I'm working on some robot pawns that are based on classic robots. So I just finished the one based on Vincent from the Black
Nice.
Hole. So that was cool.
For the people the people born in the 90s, that was a classic Disney movie.
Oh man, that was a classic mess with your head movie. Yeah, it really was very. But I've also got if you follow me on Twitter, I'm 3DP Professor on Twitter. I've been posting pictures of these as they've been going, and once the prints are all done, I'm going to post pictures of these.
Yeah.
I don't know when I'll release the files, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, I've noticed you've got Marvin the Martian as well, and
Was
you've
that?
got the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy robot.
Yeah, I got Marvin.
Yeah, and you've got not Back to the Future, Buck Rogers, the robot.
Yes, I got Twiggy on there. Yeah.
Cool.
And then I've also got a Voltron one that's like super kawaii. That is all like if you're like me, you've always wondered what Hello Kitty and Voltron would look like together. Well, now we know.
So, say I was going to start an Etsy store, and
Yeah.
I want to make some money out of this just to cover my safe, running my printers, mitigate the cost of having my.
Yeah, it definitely, ever since I've had an Etsy store, my printers have been self-sustaining. Every bit of filament that I've bought, every repair that I've needed to make to my printer, every upgrade, I have paid for with funds from my Etsy store. So if you are a designer and you have stuff that people want, I think putting it out there on Etsy is a no-brainer. First of all, Etsy's super easy to set up. Secondly, they make shipping super easy.
Oh, they
Like
do?
if you're shipping, yeah. If you need to ship around the world, whenever you sell something, there's a little button on the invoice that says print a shipping label. So when you're done with manufacturing it, you hit print a shipping label. It calculates the weight and cost and price and everything, and you can even tell it, hey, give me an extra $2 for handling and the materials for the envelope and stuff like that.
Oh, that is cool because I'm calling in from Canada right now, and shipping here is just a pain in the behind.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a pain in America too. If you're doing it by hand, if you're doing it yourself, it's a pain in the neck. They've automated that. That alone is worth the price of admission for working with Etsy. Now, Etsy though, they charge ridiculously little. If you put up something, it's kind of weird for 3D printing things because they always say, well, how many do you have on hand? Well, I don't have any on hand, but I can make as many as you want. So I generally set my quantity to be the number of them that I'm willing to produce in a week.
Right.
So when I sold the boards, which actually is a surprisingly easy print, much easier than the chess sets, and I was selling those for $40, and I think I'm still selling them on there for $40. I would put a dozen on there, and then at the end of the week, I'd re-up that to a dozen. They charge you 26 listing. And you have to renew that listing after a little while, but it's 20 cents per listing, whether you're listing one thing or 100 things. It's 20 cents. That's ludicrously small.
Yeah.
Now it does mean that if you throw up 1,000 listings for 1,000 things, and only 2 of them sell, you kind of have to pick and choose and be a little bit judicious about what you're doing. But Etsy is super easy to set up, and they make shipping easy for you. So all you have to do is experience a slight bit of success, and Etsy's well worth it, in my
How
opinion.
do you get that success though? Because you've just said you're an award-winning designer. You know, you got a printer for your troubles. But for somebody who's
Yeah.
starting from zero, what can they do?
Well, yeah, it's going to be. I don't know. I've kind of gotten enough sales that I've bought other printers, but certainly not enough that if I had bought this printer when I did at the price that it was at the time, that I would. I don't know. No, I might have made back. I would have made back my money eventually, but what you do is the same thing you do in any other business. You make stuff that people want at a price that they want it. I mean, that sounds brain dead once you say it out loud, but it's really true. You got to give people what they want. And so if you've designed a bunch of, and it's interesting to approach design from a customer base standpoint. Well, what do people want? Well, people like Doctor Who, so I'll sell a Doctor Who ring. That was literally the first thing I sold on
Yeah.
Etsy, was Doctor Who rings, and I sold tons of
And
them.
interestingly,
Um,
people keep asking for my Arduino and Raspberry Pi TARDIS models, and I printed somebody else's. My model is actually Count Spatula's on Thingiverse. It works for Tested now. So people keep asking, and the reason why I'll not do them is partly because it's somebody else's design.
yeah, yeah. I mean, do you attribute him, and is it non-commercial?
I just wrote an article about it. I made it for myself and wrote an article about it. So I haven't got an Etsy
Yeah.
store yet, but you're making me interested in doing it. So you designed your own TARDIS to avoid that issue completely, right?
When I made the TARDIS ring, I modified an existing design, but I modified it a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the TARDIS is even if you design it from scratch, it's still a bunch of blocks on a block.
Yeah, and it still
You
belongs
know?
to the BBC.
No, actually, it doesn't. That's the thing about the TARDIS.
Oh, right, cool.
Well, they don't own police boxes.
Ah, okay. They own the name then, I guess. So
They own the name Doctor Who. They own the characters, and they own the design for the characters. But the specific design of a police box, you can't claim ownership of telephone poles and phone boxes. You
Yeah.
know, those that are out there. Now, I'm not trying to justify when I am selling Doctor Who board games and Doctor Who TARDIS rings and things like that. Of their intellectual property. I'm not going to try and justify that. I'm not going to say that I'm doing anything. You know, I'm not going to try and claim that what they're producing is in the pub. I'm making money and having success based on their IP. Okay? And if I try to justify it as anything else, I'm lying, and I'm not going to do that. The truth is the only reason why I can sell those is because the BBC, well, one, I'm too friggin' small for them to sue.
yeah,
And two, the BBC doesn't want to deal with suing everybody who makes some fan work of Doctor Who because they view those as building their brand, which in a way it's true. I'm kind of doing them a
yeah.
favor because
It's the fan base. And actually, George
Yeah.
Lucas had a very similar opinion about Star Wars stuff in that as long as you were not making merchandise on a scale, he was quite happy for
Yeah.
people to do fan-based stuff, right?
well, and the woman who made Twilight, as lambasted as that is, had the exact same opinion. In fact, she welcomed the crafters and makers and T-shirt makers to her premieres and stuff like that, saying, "Listen, you know, you love my work. I appreciate that. I'm not going to go and sue you guys for loving my work, but at the same time, we are all kind of sheltered in the safe harbor of the BBC's warship, and if we might notice that the cannons could very easily point towards us. The thing is, if they decided to sue, they would have to sue everybody.
Yeah. But they wouldn't sue us right away. First of all, would be a
At
takedown.
this time, the answer is no. Yeah, yeah.
So
And at this time, it's a no, but it could turn at any time. And when that turns, I cannot say, hey, you know, you didn't. No, I'm in the wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and defend myself. I'm in the wrong on this one. And Meanwhile, I still love Doctor Who, so
Yeah,
as long as they don't kill me for it,
yeah.
as long as they don't go full Dalek.
Or Cyberman, either or.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm probably going to start an Etsy store now after you inspired me. Is your advice to market it via things that you can see a demand for, or do you kind of see it as a
I don't market a thing on Etsy. I put the listings out there, and the people find me. Now, I could market it, and I could try to, but mostly it's just a case of I try to produce things that people want, and leave it at that.
right?
Um,
So
I
you're basically doing it for the fun of it, and if people like it, they like it.
Yeah, because I'm in a position to spend a whole bunch of money on marketing and stuff like that and hope that it comes back to me, especially when my biggest sellers are somebody else's intellectual property,
Yeah.
um I guess partially I'm lazy, so maybe that's what all it boils down to. But I every time you put out an ad, it's a risk. And I did do some ads for my most recent Kickstarter, which closed, and I learned a lot from doing those ads. But I mean, the basic rule of ads is the more you want to make, the more you got to spend.
Yeah.
Again, I'm lazy, didn't want to spend
But
that
that
much.
turning that around for the people listening, that's actually a good thing in that you've been lazy and still been successful in for your own satisfaction.
Well, successful is an interesting term. I mean, I'm not paying the bills with this
But you
regularly.
have had hundreds of sales.
Uh, but I have had hundreds of sales, well, over a course of 4 years. But yes, and like I said, it's paid for its own filament. It's paid for upgrades to my 3D printers. It's paid for the occasional cheap new 3D printer. So yeah, it's been successful, and I'm still very lazy. So yeah, I'll fair assessment.
Yeah, so I think that's a good note. It's a positive note. So we've talked about what you shouldn't do. We've talked about what you can do, and we've talked about what the opportunities are. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Any nuggets of advice you want to leave the listeners with today?
Again, I just want to reiterate: don't be a jerk, guys. If you get your stuff, if people who get their stuff ripped off and get people stealing their stuff, it hurts and it sucks and it makes people want to stop creating amazing things and sharing it with the world, because every time you share, there's a chance that somebody is going to hurt you, and I understand that and I get it, but my advice is ignore the jerks, ignore the people who are out there giving you reasons not to do great things, because we need more people doing more great things. And so if the jerks are going to stop you from doing that, ignore them. They're not worth it. Just go and do great things. Share it with the great people. The people who love the stuff that you do will tell you that they love the stuff that you do. And realize that if there be jerks that you find who are getting in the way of you doing cool things, try and look at it as some sort of a gift. Clearly, they're recognizing your value or the value of your stuff, and so maybe you should pursue that value a little bit. Maybe this is an opportunity more than a hindrance.
That's great advice. Thank you, Joe. So you can find Joe on Etsy and you can find him on Twitter. He's at 3D Professor on Twitter, and you can find
There's a second P in there, 3DP Professor.
3DP Professor. Sorry, we'll put that in the show notes. And
Yeah, we have to like Porky Pig the P's in there, 3D Professor.
and you're also 3D Printing Professor on YouTube, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's where the moniker started.
Awesome. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you everybody for listening. Please do subscribe, give us a review, like us, share us, and most of all, listen out for us next time. Thank you, everybody.